Well, a very warm welcome. My name's Jenny Herrera and I'm the CEO of the Good Business Charter, and we are delighted to welcome you today. I think we've got a mix of those who are already accredited organisations with us and those who are have perhaps been invited along by one of our accredited organisations to hear a bit more about the Good Business Charter and why we think it is a great solution for you to showcase your social impact. So we are going to start with hearing from Julian, our founder. We're then going to move on to hear from Kate about how the TSB have used a Good Business Charter and their experience, and then on to Roger from the Institute of Directors, who was our 1000th accredited organisation pretty much a year ago today. It was certainly last March. After that, we will open the floor to Q&A. We can use the chat, we can use the raise hand function. I will manage all that as we go through. So do be thinking of some good questions for us. And we just want to really hear from you and make sure you go away with no questions unanswered. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Julian. The floor is yours. You'll just need to unmute first, because...
Sorry, I thought Jen did that. Right, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me? Anyone hear me? Give me a wave. Yeah, great. Start again. Thanks, Jenny, for that. Thank you all hugely for joining, giving up your time today to hear what we've got to say. Some of you have heard me speak before. I'm sorry if it's repeated, because the story doesn't change much, I guess. But I'm a shopkeeper at my first shop at 19. We have 50 stores now in a ferociously competitive environment out of consumer electronics. We turn over 200 million, employ 400 or 500, between 400 and 500 colleagues. And it's tough at the moment, like all of us, or most of us probably having a tough time. But we do feel, well, we'll come to that in a minute. We've got 5, I guess, picked up just arbitrarily slightly, 5 modest claims to fame. One, we're in the highest sales per square foot in the Guinness Book of Records for that, which we're proud of, helped by the fact the shops are very small. Secondly, we have a royal warrant. Thirdly, we have a gender pay gap in favour of women, which is very unusual in our sector. Fourthly, the Which Consumer Association members have voted us the best retailer of any kind for, I think, 7 of the last 10 years. But the most important thing I guess I'm proud of is that we give 15% of our profits away to charity, and we've done that for many years. We've gone on to, we used to give money away to causes we thought were good, and we still do that. But we've set up 7 national organisations, not-for-profits, and we got 7 terrific teams doing some really great work out there. So that's a bit about the business really quickly. We've been through ups and downs like most business managers would have been over the years, the decades we've been in business, 45 years we've been going. We've seen, I wouldn't say we've seen it all, but we've seen a lot of dramas and crises and nightmares and cash flow problems and difficulties. So I guess I must have learned quite a bit over the years, or I wouldn't be still here running the biz and the business still operating. But the overarching thing I've learned, the most important thing I've learned, is that it's all about the people. And what I mean by that is that one will observe completely different outputs from people depending on how one treats them. And I learned that both from my own business. And 30 years ago, I went to work very closely with Archie Norman in his turnaround at Asda. And the stuff that I did in my little business, he wanted to try in his huge business. And we saw with different demographic workforce, different stores, different products, the same things we did worked. And really, you know, what we did was treating our particularly our workforce, we call our staff, our colleagues, and our customers well. But that applies to all the stakeholders, actually. Suppliers are important, subcontractors are important, and the community we work within, they're all important. And simple premise that, you know, what goes around comes around. If you treat people well, you get it back. I can demonstrate that massively, actually, on a financial basis. Just one example I can give you. We have 12 holiday homes at Richard Sounds, and 70% of our colleagues have at least one free holiday a year. That costs us quite a bit of money, but that pales into insignificance compared to the huge amount we save in. So shrinkage is a euphemism for theft in retail, and we save millions of pounds a year by having minuscule theft, which is way below the national average, which pays for the holiday homes many times over. So apart from me sleeping better at night and doing the right thing, it's actually really good for the business. Now, that's one example. The book, I wrote a book after my time at Asda called The Richer Way. I'm not here to sell books. You can have a free book with pleasure if you email me a delivery address. I will happily give you a copy, but it still sells to this day. 30 years ago, I wrote the book after my time there, and it's all about how to get the best out of people. And I've got dozens and dozens of examples of things one can do and tips. Anyway, I went back into the business, I kept my head down, and then I got annoyed by all the bad press that some bosses were getting. And it really annoyed me for three reasons. One, it gave all the decent guys and girls, working hard to make an honest buck a bad name, because the public thought all bosses are bad. Secondly, I thought they were wrong. I thought it would come to a bad ending. And in fact, many businesses haven't, the ones that did exploit their staff and ripped off their customers, didn't pay their tax and bled their companies dry, it didn't end well. So I guess I was proved right there. But also they had a short-term cost advantage because they weren't paying their staff very much. So it used to annoy me, this, and I finally did something about it and wrote a book about this, which came out a few years ago, called The Ethical Capitalist. And the book is about responsible capitalism. And what I mean by that is capitalism's got a terrible, terrible track record historically, from colonialism and slavery and exploitation and pollution, to name but a few. And even up to the present day, during COVID, people were dying in the Midlands because of overcrowded conditions, and they weren't even earning the minimum wage. So this is not a thing from thousands of years ago, which was bad. Up to this present day, it's still bad in places. But capitalism could be a force for good too. And the businesses can provide good jobs for people. It can provide products and services that we enjoy, even love. And of course, businesses that pay their taxes are supporting, the doctors, the nurses, the police, the education, etc., etc. So good business should be encouraged, but we need to polarize. Businesses have to be polarized differentiated between good and bad, and that's what the book's about. Writing a book is one thing. I'm more of I'm more of a doer than a thinker, I guess, and I want to do something about it. I think government should be much firmer on taxation, closing the gaps in the system, enabling people to take advantage. But I can't do much about that. But I felt we desperately needed a signpost for the public. And the TSB, who've been wonderful supporters of what we're doing, did some research into this, and they've discovered that 97% of the public want to support responsible businesses. The trouble is they don't know who they are, because the bad guys don't say, don't shop here, we don't pay our tax, or we don't pay the real living wage. So, excuse me. So I desperately felt we needed a signpost for the public to identify these good organizations. And the Good Business Charter is not just for business, by the way, it's for not-for-profits too. So, and there's no one else in this space. So the B Corporation, who we admire, we applaud anyone on this platform, but they don't do the same thing. That's the only one that's slightly similar. They're more of a self-auditing function and improvement service for businesses who want to get better at what they do. The Good Business Charter, we felt, had to be all or nothing. In other words, for the public to believe in it, they had to understand what the business had signed up to. Now, we got I went to see Frances O'Grady when she was running the TUC, and she put one of her top lieutenants on our board right at the beginning. The CBI likewise, Dame Carolyn Fairburn also put in her deputy at the time onto our board, and we discussed between us these 10 components, which we all agreed on were really, really important. So, and we've had their support from an early stage. FSB and IOD of late have come as well, been very supportive. So we really have got some big names in society supporting what we're doing, which is fantastic. We've also seen tremendous growth. We launched at the beginning of COVID with worst time to launch anything, and we've got, I think, about 1,300 signatures so far. And we want to grow quickly, but not too quickly. We want good people to sign up. It's not just a numbers game. We want quality rather than quantity. The whole brand will be trashed if we take in people that shouldn't be there. So there is monitoring, there is enforcement too. So I'm jumping around a little bit. We set the Good Business Charter up, and we have a terrific team working there, led by Jenny, you've heard from already. Why is it? How does it work? Well, as long as you can tick the 10 boxes, you can get in really quickly, in probably less than an hour. If you can only tick 7 or 8 boxes, you're doing well, but we'll help you over the line by pointing you in the direction of organizations that can advise and help you get there. It's incredibly cheap because it's subsidized by my wife and I. It's free to sign up. The first year is cheap and nominal thereafter. And in fact, most businesses, the day they sign up, they do a press release and they get terrific local press, which pays for their subscription, we hope, for years to come. So it really is a virtuous circle. And obviously, it's a numbers game. The more people that sign up over the years, the better the recognition is going to be. But even in the meantime, this local press will generate business, and people will start fighting a path to your door. But also the recognition it gives businesses that deserve it. They do. The bad guys get written about in the papers, there's very little press about good people, and this is a real good news story. So so that's it. It's easy to sign up. It's incredibly good value, and we think it's really, really important what we're doing. I absolutely believe that businesses, it's really tough at the moment. We have great differentiation. The fact that customers, our brand is strong out there in the eyes of the public. People get good service. They're treated by our colleagues who are hopefully, they don't come whistling to work every day. I'm not pretending, because they've still got to work. But you know, they're happier than most, and therefore they're happy to give good service, and it's a real win-win-win. So we think the Good Business Charter is a real positive case for good. I mean, we're talking about today showcase of social impact and how to show the public what you stand for. You know, we think that there's not a better way, really. We think it's fantastic. If you look at ESG, there's loads of stuff on the environment out there. There's loads of stuff on governance. There's very little concerning the S in ESG, the social impact. And we think ticking our box absolutely tells the world that what you're about. And we think it's a fantastic solution for businesses not knowing how to get their S credentials out there. And we actually, one of our projects is to convince, and we're working closely, we have a lot of people in the financial community already signed up, but we'd love to be the go-to for investors, for investment organizations, for pension funds. And I want them to be saying to companies, we want to ethically invest. Are you signed up to the Good Business Charter? Because then we know you've ticked that S box. And that we think is really, really, I mean, it's a no-brainer. We think it's obvious they should do that, but I would say that, wouldn't I? I'm a little bit biased, but hopefully over the months and years to come, that will become more of a situation. Anyway, I've spoken enough. Huge thanks for listening to me. Thanks again for coming today. I'm going to hang around, of course, if you've got any questions later. Back to Jenny, I think, to introduce our next speaker. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Julian. As you said, we are a bit biased, obviously, so it was really important for us that we could have a couple of our accredited organisations also share. And so I'm delighted to first of all go over to Kate, who's going to share the experience from the TSB.
Thanks, Jenny, and good morning, everybody. So for those of you who don't know much about TSB, I'll do the whistle-stop tour of who we are. We're a medium-sized bank. We look after around about 5 million customers in the UK through our branches, through digital channels, through video banking and telephone banking. We're an organisation of around about 6,000 colleagues. And we're spread up and down the country. We do have a heritage that goes back over 200 years, and you know, we're really proud of our social heritage, because our founder, Reverend Henry Duncan, back in 1810 was the founder of the savings bank movement up in Scotland. So we do have solid credentials to work from. But if I bring us up to date, in 2019, we set out really on the early part of our responsible business journey. And what we wanted to do was to have a greater impact, but we had fewer resources to make that impact. So we were looking at how we could really focus in on the things that were going to really matter to our customers, to our colleagues, and to our stakeholders. So the starting point for me, as I set that work out, was really to look at the different kind of frameworks or accreditations that were out there, because I needed to answer a couple of questions. So, you know, are we getting it right? So are we heading in the right direction? And actually, you know, rather than me marking my own homework, is there somebody else out there who can say, actually, yes, you are, and give me the, you know, the thumbs up? So we were introduced to Good Business Charter actually in early 2020 by the CBI. And, you know, it instantly appealed to me. And the reason it appealed was, one, it was straightforward, or is straightforward. And, you know, I looked at other schemes which much more complicated. And as Julian has already said, not only is it straightforward, but it's all encompassing. So it does really tick all of the boxes across the different areas of responsible business. It was also very relatable. So when I started to talk to people within my organisation, so in a larger organisation, obviously you have to go out and you have to kind of appeal to people and say, you know, can you do this bit of work? Can you provide this bit of evidence for me? But I got a really kind of easy pathway into kind of that stakeholder, because it was so relatable and straightforward. And I think the thing that really appealed was around this making a commitment and, looking at those 10 components and being able to tick, and we were able to tick some of them quite easily and go, yeah, we absolutely do that. But there were some parts of the components which we were like, oh, we could probably do a bit better in this space. But the fact that we could make a promise to bridge the gap and still get accredited was a really, really positive thing for us. So as I said, we looked at the components. We, I took it out to lots of different parts of my business, and really there was a couple of areas that really stood out for us where we could go further. So this time, like early 2020, we're just heading into pandemic. The world is about to kind of turn upside down on us. And one area that we looked at very closely was how quickly we paid our supply chain. So we basically realized that very early on in the pandemic that, as a bigger organization, it was incumbent on us to make sure that the smaller organizations, at the very least, that we deal with, we paid them as quickly as possible. So we made a pledge that we would pay them within 10 days. So we kind of kicked that work off at the same time as going through our accreditation process. What the Good Business Charter accreditation process helped us with was to really make sure we went and committed with the prompt payment code. So we got the tick and we went further. I'm really proud to say that work and that focus on that work means that in 2022 we paid our small suppliers on average in 4 days, and we paid all of our suppliers in average of 9 days. And we're not a small organization. I mean, we're not a retailer. We don't have thousands and thousands of suppliers, but we have a fair number. So that was a really a big step, and I think the Good Business Charter has really helped us hone in on that as an activity. But it also helped us really hone in on some other stuff that we were doing around strengthening our environmental commitments, and importantly, looking at the clarity of our tax status and how we display that and communicate that to the wider world. So we signed up in June, and it was an absolutely central part of our launch comms around our responsible business strategy, the Do What Matters plan. Now, following on from that, we're really proud to display the Good Business Charter mark for all the reasons that Julian said, because consumers want to deal with good businesses. They just don't know who those good businesses are. And if it really answers that challenge for them, but it only answers that challenge if we can turn this into a movement. And I know, Julian, you said about we need to go at a pace, but we need to, all of us who are on here, who are accredited organizations, or anybody who is who's thinking about joining, displaying it proudly is actually part of the deal, because that's the way we get our message out. That's the way we turn this into a movement that consumers can really understand and recognize. I think there are so many pressures on consumers these days. Cost of living. For our bank customers, we see the pressures that customers are under. It's not equal, so we obviously have some customers that are doing quite well out of this. But hence the reason we need to really lean into kind of social equality. But what we are seeing through the research that we're doing is that dealing with businesses that are good, that are sustainable, who are socially conscious and ethical, consumers still see this as an important part of their decision-making process. Now, Julian's going to, skeptical about this stat that I've got, but recent research says that in the financial services market, that 56% of consumers don't mind paying extra for something that they consider to be good, and I mean that by an ethical stance. Now, the proof with that for us is we shouldn't be adding extra cost into products. We should be delivering the products at the right cost for our customers and giving them the added halo benefit that they are dealing with a good business. I think for me, I have a vision for good business and the community that we work within in the Good Business Charter to become like a red tractor mark or a fair trade mark, so that really people instantly recognise it. And I would be very happy to talk to any of you about how we kind of keep talking about it within our organisation and with our customers, but I'd really appeal to you to give it a go, and we found massive benefit from it. So I'm a fan as well, Julian.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much, Kate. That was really clear, really helpful. And, it's just great to hear that something that was created then just has fitted so well into all that TSB is doing. And those stats around prompt payment are amazing. And we'd just love to see so many other businesses follow suit. And we're really proud, actually, to have the prompt payment as one of our 10. It's perhaps not something that all organisations or all schemes looking at sustainability think about. But it's certainly speaking into that S of ESG. So keep thinking about your questions. We're not quite there yet. So I'm now delighted to hand over to Roger from the IOD.
Jenny, thank you very much indeed. And hello, everyone. And Jenny, thank you for reminding me that the IOD was the 1000th signatory or accredited member of the Good Business Charter, which is great. Although, to be honest, I wish that we'd been the first, or maybe the second or the third member or signatory of the Good Business Charter. But, better late than never. And for us, it really was a no-brainer when we finally took a close look at what the Good Business Charter was all about, because we realised that we were just very aligned with what the Good Business Charter was trying to achieve, both in a general sense, in terms of really trying to advocate and promote responsible business, responsible long-term business, which cared about the stakeholders which were engaged with a company, but also looking at the individual components of the framework that you've created. There really was an alignment with that. So, it was very easy for us to decide to sign. But of course, the IOD itself is quite a small organisation. I mean, we're an SME. We have significantly less than 100 employees. So the real interest for us in terms of coming together with a Good Business Charter was to use this with our members, to offer this as a ready-made framework which our members could adopt to take forward their good business practices. And it's, this is the sort of, I suppose it's the sort of thing that if we'd thought of it earlier, we might have wanted to have invented ourselves as the IOD. But as you had done it, and you, Jenny and Julian, had already thought of it and created such a terrific framework, I suppose our view was, why try and reinvent the wheel? This is a great framework which we can encourage and advocate with our members. And a second big thing for us was the idea of kind of forming a partnership with you as a body. So not just to sign up ourselves, I mean, great, that may send a nice signal, but to engage in an ongoing partnership with you, reaching out to our members and reaching out to other businesses. And we've been doing that. I mean, I was delighted to take part recently in a podcast with Julian. Thank you very much for that. That was extremely well received by our members. And that's really how I see our relationship, as being as a kind of a partnership rather than just a name on a list of signatories. Just finally, I think that there is a tremendous need to promote the cause of responsible business at the moment. I mean, to us, I suppose people here to some extent will be the converted. We kind of will all believe in it by definition, but we shouldn't take for granted actually that the sort of principles that we're advocating are necessarily accepted by everyone in society. And the IOD has long argued that we need to kind of create incentives to encourage people to do the right thing. There are actually a lot of incentives out there to perhaps encourage people to do the wrong thing, to pursue short-term financial gain at the expense of other things. Now, that doesn't necessarily, though, mean that we just need to have a lot of regulation, a big regulatory burden for business to get them to do that. And as you would imagine, IOD members aren't, that's one of their common gripes, that they don't want too much unnecessary regulation, and that's fair enough. But if we're not going that route, and if we don't want to go down that route, I suppose we have to think of other mechanisms, other techniques which we can use to encourage people to do the right thing. And some of the things the IOD advocates for tries to do that. We've been advocating for a while, for example, that the corporation tax system should promote net zero. Should provide a tax incentive to pursue net zero. But I think the Good Business Charter, it tries to achieve that in another way. I think through the power of peer pressure, it can provide a way to encourage companies to think about these issues, to sign up, to take action, and really to be responsible. In addition, to providing that signal to consumers in terms of, we are committed to being a responsible business. So it can be, I think, incredibly powerful. And I think just the speed with which the Good Business Charter has expanded and developed, shows its power and shows that it's talking to a very willing audience. So I hope, we very much want to remain good partners of the Good Business Charter. And I hope we can persuade more and more companies, more and more entrepreneurs, more and more large enterprises to sign up to the Good Business Charter so that it can become, the industry standard in terms of accrediting responsible business conduct. And so once again, as with Kate, I'd be very happy to speak to any of you in terms of, what it involves to become a signatory to the Good Business Charter.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much, Roger. Thank you both for sharing. I was just, we've recently been on a bit of a brand, just looking at our brands. And one of the things that we really struggle with as a team was you have to put where you are in between sort of, this particular one was conventional and rebel. And when you're just working in that sector all the time, you think this is conventional stuff. Everyone should be doing this kind of thing. This is like standard, treating people well. But then when we got 3 of our accredited organizations in to kind of help us a little bit, one of them was one of your colleagues, Roger, from the IOD. They were the ones saying, I'm not sure. Yes, you're conventional in the sense that we're connecting in with these wonderful partnerships like the IOD, like the CBI, but actually you are going against the grain. This isn't actually what everyone is doing, sadly, and so you're a bit of a conventional rebel. So we took that and we placed ourselves somewhere in the middle of the two. Another thing interesting that came out of that branding exercise was to really think about, at the moment, our strapline is recognition for responsible business. And we've now been encouraged to think we don't just recognize. I think perhaps when we first thought it was about recognizing responsible business behavior, but actually we're now looking to recognize, encourage, and champion. And that really then encapsulates the fact that this isn't just about a third-party recognition for GBC accredited organisations. This is about, from that position, then encouraging others to follow suit and championing it, so that, we would love it to be like fair trade. That is our dream, that it has that level of recognition. And of course, then that drives people. And we know organisations right now who aren't able to join because there is one of the 10 that they're working on, and they're like, we want to, but we're just working on this, and then we'll be back, which is what we want to do. We want to nudge behaviour so that we can say that all these organisations are able to commit to all 10. So excellent. So it's time for some questions, I think. So really, the best way, at the moment you're all muted and you can't unmute, so I can't just say happily unmute. So you will need to do one of 2 things, and that is either raise your hand using the raise a hand function, or write something in the chat. And all of our speakers can just answer at will as they see things come in. Okay, so we've got Simon has raised his hand. Let me unmute you.
Thank you. This might be a bit aspirational. Do you think there is an opportunity to work with government at the national and the local authority level to look at procurement to see whether within the point scoring system for government and local authority contracts, that the Good Business Charter could be included within that to give added points to companies who are bidding for public contracts. Is that a dream which is not achievable, or is that something that should be looked at? Because that was, thinking of the carrot and stick, that's a good carrot for many companies to say, well, if it gives us an extra few points on winning public contracts and it demonstrates fair work from a local authority or government perspective, then it might actually, number one, raise the awareness, but number two, actually encourage people to go down the line of the Good Business Charter.
I've got it, Simon. Who you direct? No, that's brilliant, and familiar with that point, which we want to answer. Who do you want to answer the question?
I don't mind. Who's prepared to answer it? Who can?
I'll give a short answer, then let the expert Jenny go into more detail, if I may. It's absolutely on our shopping list, and ironically, now we're not in the EU anymore. Before we were bound by European convention, which said you couldn't give people advantages for different things. Everything had to be a level playing field within Europe. Now, ironically, we can have our own way of procurement, and we absolutely have spoken to people. And I think Jenny will give us an update on that. It's been on our shopping list from the beginning, hasn't it, Jenny? Do you want to take, and Simon, do you want to tell people about your brilliant company? You might sell some vans. When people say what they do, I'm sure our guests would love to know. Go on, Simon, do that first.
So I'm just unmuting. I muted myself, so I'm unmuting again. Yes, very briefly there, Julian very out of the blue approached us 2 years ago because we convert Volkswagen, brand new Volkswagen camper vans, very high spec, employee-owned company, 100% employee-owned, and bought a camper van, which, like the houses he talked about, the accommodation for his colleagues, added the camper van to the list of benefits, which I think has been fantastic. And so yes, if anyone was looking for a camper van, then obviously do please take a look at this. And
to be clear, we only went to him because he was a Good Business Charter member, as indeed I opened a banking account, TSB, who are looking after me very well, by the way. So yeah, I'll definitely put my money where my mouth is. Jenny, over to you. Thank you, Simon.
Brilliant. Thanks for asking that, Simon. So nationally, first of all, we've been looking very much at the social value, and conversations have been had. In fact, Julia met someone from the cabinet who I then spoke to, and they, to try and figure out how it positions in. So it is different, but there's so much overlap. Now, at a local level, that feels like an easy way to start. So we have our place-based model. York became our first GBC city couple of years ago. Just last night, if you look at our socials, you'll see that Luton announced that they are accredited as a council. It's not a GBC town yet, but they very much got each quarter to bring on another anchor and other organisations. So we hope to be able to get to that position with them and other councils around. But interestingly, I was having a conversation with one area where they're already working together on procurement with social value, and then we kind of say, well, how can this feed in? So it's very much a live discussion that we are working through and looking at how we fit in, really. They have created something that's very complex, I would say, for small businesses, and I think that's where the Good Business Charter really can cut through that and say, well, actually, you may have put something together that a big business can complete on social value, but that's just inaccessible for a small business. What about the Good Business Charter? And I know Capita, who are our first GBC accredited organisation, they tell me that when they're asked to do stuff in Scotland, they say, well, we're GBC accredited, this should fulfil what you're looking for. So it's just trying to join up those dots, which we have been continually working on, really. Before I take more questions, I'm just going to answer this one in the chat about the 10 values. Apologies that we didn't state what they were for those of you who are new to the Good Business Charter. So our first 5 are about employees. It's payment of the real living wage. It is a fair approach to minimal or 0 hours contracts if you use them. It's employee wellbeing, employee representation, and equality, diversity, and inclusion. So those are your 5 around employees. Then it's about your environmental responsibility, minimising your impact and net zero, paying your fair share of tax, customer commitment, ethical sourcing, and prompt payment to suppliers. So those are the 10 that you have to meet. And some of those are very much either you pay your suppliers promptly and sign the prompt payment code or you don't, but a lot of them are journeys around ethical sourcing, around the environment. And as part of our accreditation, we do now ask you to give a little bit of examples of the different things that you are doing in these areas. So apologies, we didn't mention that at the top.
Yes, Kate, Jenny, can I add there that Kate made a really good point that you might not be doing something, but if you promise to, and we will obviously follow up with you on that, we'll let you in. We're not going to be awkward about it. So if you say, no, we don't pay our suppliers properly, but we absolutely agree we should be, we're going to get our act together and we promise to do it, that's absolutely fine, Jen, isn't it? We're a bit flexible in that regard. Yes,
if the commitment's there, then we just expect that, you know, within a few months there's evidence that it's all in train and about to be in place. So yeah. Okay, so Ricardo, you have a question. Let me ask you to unmute.
Yes, thanks a lot. Rick here from Colizza. Yeah, for the people that don't know us, we're a sustainable pension scheme regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority and part also of the GBC. My question was about what kind of new initiatives are you trying to do to promote GBC to new companies, and what can the current organization do from the connection and network to try to engage with new companies that want to work with the GBC accreditation process?
Brilliant. Thank you for that question. I may as well answer that first, probably because it's more operational and on the ground. So our things like this, of course, encouraging our organisations to invite people along, and that's the reason we've recorded it, so that it can be a resource that we can use. We very much value our network. So we've just seen another flurry of small businesses join in the last couple of weeks. That's because the Federation of Small Businesses circulated our annual report in their newsletter. So, you know, it is those networks just getting the word back out, encouraging people to look at it. So the CBI obviously is one of our key networks, but trade associations we do see as a key way, because then we can go sector by sector and say, does this work for your sector? If it doesn't, how can we make it attractive to your sector, get that trade association to join, and then promote it through the sector. So and then the place-based is another way. So there's sort of lots of different opportunities, really. What I would say is that for each individual organization, if you were able to speak to individual suppliers, clients, customers, and where there's kind of like some interest, just link them into us, because we want to help them get there. You know, if they're like, well, it sounds great, but, you know, this really, because we are a relatively small team, we are dependent on organizations spreading the word, and that is how most organizations are coming to us anyway, by word of mouth. So we're sort of doing what we can through trade associations, through the place-based, and equipping you guys. But really, if each of our 1,300 organizations was able to talk to 2 or 3 of their key suppliers, customers, and kind of inspire them, then obviously the growth will to some extent take care of itself.
Well, that's great, Jenny. Can I just add to Ricardo? I touched before on investment organizations, and we'd love the investment association to say, look, you know, we are talking to them. They've been a little bit slow, dare I say, but I'm sure they're busy. But we'd love to, you know, inspire them and convince them that we're so important that you know, anyone that people that ethical investors want to go to should have signed up to us. And the moment they, you know, if they issued an edict that, you know, we believe the Good Business Charter and we strongly recommend, you know, you look for their accreditation, there'd be a rush to our door of hundreds of the biggest companies in the country wanting to get signed up. So that isn't going to happen overnight, but that is one little project amongst several. And Jenny mentioned trade associations, of which I guess they're a specialist trade association. So, you know, we are working at it. We're only small, but and also we don't want to grow too quickly for the reason I said. We do want quality as well as quantity. But you make a good point. It's number one on our job list every day, isn't it? To keep growing, you know, but in a good way. But thank you for the question.
Just to pick up on Giles' question that he put in the chat a while ago about how sort of small businesses and sole traders they could use the accreditation and membership to benefit and attract new clients. You know, it's all part and parcel really of getting the brand more recognised. And for some organisations, they've got more opportunities than others. And I think, you know, if we're all pulling together to in the early years, we needed to be sure that it works, and we got organisations to join, and that has obviously now been proved with organisations from a range of sizes and sectors. So again, part of our kind of branding work we did at the start of the year is to now look at how we get the word out more to the general public. Our social media followings at the moment are in their majority accredited organisations. So we now, and with that stat from Kate from the TSB, like, we're totally going to be all over that, because we want to really then help get out to all these people who are like, we want to know who the responsible businesses are. We haven't done a huge amount of that. And so we are now going to be moving much more. Expect to see us more active on social media, more campaigns, and really pushing that, which I think then hopefully our different networks can get behind, and it will benefit everyone. Okay, Simon.
Okay, yeah, morning everyone. Thanks for the talk so far, all been brilliant. This question may well have already been picked up in the chat, but I'm a sole trader without any employees. So I just looked at I asked the question about the 10 sort of like things that you needed to tick off. Obviously, I've got 4 things immediately that I can't tick because I haven't got any employees. So I'm just wondering how I, as an organisation my brand is called Allies of Nature. I run a life coaching business where I help people to rediscover their joy. I mean, what I do with people is I take them out into nature to act as a magical child and reconnect with flowers and animals and all that sort of thing. So, and I come from a background of doing a lot of environmental work and being involved in transition towns and that type of thing. So there's lots of boxes that I could tick, but obviously there's 4, for instance, that I can't. So is there sort of like a subdivision of the Good Business Charter that you're thinking about sort of like creating that could accommodate, self-employed businesses that are doing good work for the planet, etc., but, can't tick those boxes that you've got already in place?
Yeah, we've got some very passionate sole traders who are part of the Good Business Charter, and I think at the moment they have to answer the employee ones on the basis that if they were to get employees, but it is in our radar just to get that changed so that if you've got no employee, you don't get the comment boxes, you'd be pleased to hear, but we will move that so that sole traders simply don't get those questions. But the reality is, and here in York, where we're place-based, we've got sole traders who are really passionate about being a GBC city. So I think, we're all dealing with people, and that's what we really, that I think is a key to getting the GBC more well known. It's about that actually everyone is consumers, people are working places and buying things, and actually as we rub shoulders with different people, and as people look at your website and the website of sole traders, to be able to see the GBC accredited logo there, it's all going to help raise awareness. Some sole traders are more active on social media than many larger businesses where you have to get it signed off by lots of layers. So I think everyone can come in at a different place, and that's what we love about the fact that people right from sole traders right the way up to FTSE 100 companies can access and be part of the Good Business Charter.
If I could just come back on a point just momentarily, you mentioned about sort of like those towns that wanted to become sort of like GBC accredited, and I just mentioned it in passing that those transition town initiatives, if you could sort of like partner up with other organisations that are trying to do the same thing, maybe you can all, what's the term I'm looking for? Sort of like, hit 2 birds with 1 stone, really. You compile all your forces together, and then, where somebody's been doing work over, say, like in the east of the country to soften people up through transition towns, then you could come in as, the Good Business Charter and vice versa, and all start to serve people from a similar sort of like, concentric circles, really, is what I'm going for.
Brilliant. That's definitely, transition towns, I should make a note. And yes, I mean, I've had quite a few conversations with different places that either have something in train and are looking at how they can connect in with us. What we're keen to do is that people don't start to establish something when we've already got something that will tick the box, but the more that we can link in with other organisations, the better. So that's really, really helpful. Right, let's see if we've got any other questions in the chat or anything else that anyone wants to add. Okay, I don't think there's anything that we haven't covered in the chat. So any other questions? Anything you might want to, anything further for Roger or Kate about how it's worked out in their settings? If not, I'll be letting you go early for good behaviour. Oh, hang on a minute, I saw a hand go up. Oh, Simon's back. I'm not sure. Well, since no one else asking, we'll let you ask something else.
No, that's fine. I wanted to ask about, sort of the I'm going to call it general greenwashing. I know it's not. This is not. We're not talking green here, but as the organisation grows and more people do join, how are you going to tackle the issue of self-certification and people saying, "Oh, yeah, we do that"? Is there some sort of reporting, auditing, what process are you going to use? Because we're always in dangerous territory of people taking advantage of the situation or companies taking advantage of the situation, and then it's easy for one business to drag everybody else down and for the brand to be denigrated in the eyes of the consumer. So how are you going to tackle that?
Thanks, Simon. Great question. Actually, there's just one in the chat which says the same sort of thing. I missed the start. Did you say how you make sure the businesses do follow the charter? So I suppose let me tell you what we're doing, but I think it would be good to hear from Kate and Roger about how they feel, because I think I'm hoping that what I explain is how it works from their point of view. So we paused last April to strengthen it because we were and are very conscious of this risk. So the first thing I would say is that we now insist that an organisation puts the GBC accredited logo on their website before the accreditation is finalised. The reason we do that is because that does minimise the risk that organisations are saying they're doing stuff when they know full well that they're not. But if they hide it, if they just tell us and then we put them on our website, then they can get away with it, essentially. So we feel that an organisation is much less likely to put a logo on their website that says that they care about their employees' well-being, that they pay the real living wage, when they know full well that they're not doing it. Could they still do it? They could, but we would say it minimises the risk. And this is something that the CBI certainly said from the very beginning when we discussed self-certification, that in this day and age of social media, it is less likely that an organisation is going to state that they do these 10 specific things. It's not just we care about the planet and we care about people. They are being asked to commit to these 10 specific things. And then if they put on their website that they are committed to them, then they would be pretty foolish to do that knowing full well that they haven't, because we are asking them to answer honestly. Now, we do have whistleblowing and have done from the very start on our website, so that if you are an employee of an accredited organisation, a customer, a supplier, and you know that they are not compliant, you can raise a concern and then we will investigate. So if you say, I'm a member, I'm a supplier of this organisation and I haven't been paid 2 months after the invoice due date, then we will go and find out what's going on. And if we find that actually that organisation is telling us things that they're just not doing, we will strip them of their accreditation. We're not just going to kind of go in some halfway house. We'll just say, well, in that case, you can't be GBC accredited. So we will pull them off. The other thing that we're doing with all medium and large organisations, we talk to them during the year and we find out what they're doing. We hold them to account. We want to make sure that things are moving forwards. We've had organisations that say, we've dropped the ball, and this is why, in fact, just recently an organisation had left because they admitted they weren't compliant, and they're coming back because now they're in a position to do that. So that's been really great to see. For the smaller organisations, we cannot possibly do that, but we are going to do spot checks where we will just check in on them and make sure that they are compliant. There's always a risk, but the reality is there's no middle ground between a full-scale expensive audit, which would cost thousands of pounds, and this lighter touch, but with good mechanisms in place. And even if you were, I'm an auditor by profession, by trade, even if you were to do a full-scale audit, I could come into a large company and you could still hide the people who are on 0 hours contracts. You know, it's not that easy, or it isn't that easy to pick up everything. So it has to be done on some level of trust. So that's the way that we are managing that, and always open to suggestions on how we can keep strengthening it without it being a huge financial burden on us.
And Jenny, don't we
so
keep
Kate, let's hear from you. Oh, yeah, Julian first.
Sorry, Jen. Don't we also keep an eye on social media? If any bad court cases turn up and we think that's not really representing us very nicely, we might dig around there, mightn't we? If we saw someone
Yeah, and on renewal each year as well. Yeah, and obviously we do background checks when they accredit. We look at Google, socials, company's house, but we do that on renewal as well. So like a year on, you know, let's just check everything's still in order to the best that we can find out publicly. So, so I'd be really interested to hear from Kate and then Roger about kind of how you see kind of that position and your experience from.
Yeah, so for me, like we were pretty early accredited organisation, weren't we? So, and I know it's kind of strengthened, but for us, you know, the reputational risk of exactly what you say, putting something out into our socials or onto our website, into the press, wherever, you know, we were always going to have somebody that taps us on the shoulder and says, excuse me, I don't see that. So we have to, you know, we are, for us, there is a reputational risk if we don't do the things that we've said that we're going to do. So we treat that very seriously. Also, you know, it's part of my governance process within my responsible business structure. Now, I get I'm in a bigger organization, so for some of you this isn't going to be as relevant, but you know, for me, the ongoing review of how we're progressing against those activities is something that I look at as part and parcel of as an ongoing process. I don't just pick it up every year. I'm doing that as an ongoing thing to see how we can perhaps strengthen or how we could perhaps go further, and because I'm looking at the positive stories for these things that I can, you know, that I can use. So don't know if that answers it, Jenny, but it is really, I think if it's it's about getting it embedded in your business rather than just picking it up every 12 months and going, am I still here? You know, there's a subtle difference with those two things, I think.
Yeah. Roger?
I think, yes, I think the process you've described, Jenny, is really the only really practical one that could be adopted. I mean, we've been wrestling with similar issues because we're potentially wanting to introduce the concept of a voluntary code of conduct for directors, which directors of companies would sign up to. And we've been thinking, how would we enforce it? We can't set up some, you know, vast supervisory, investigatory apparatus that just would be workable, wouldn't be practical. We're not like the FCA or, you know, the SFO or some organization like that. I think, you know, the approach that you've described, Jenny, is a good one. Effectively, you're using stakeholders out there to be your eyes and ears, you know, and if they come across anomalies, then, you know, they can be looked into. So I think it sounds reasonable.
Can I just add, Jen, please, to what Roger says? That is actually happening, Roger. We've had customers complain about being ripped off. We've had staff saying, hang on a minute, I'm not being paid the real living wage. What are they up to? I mean, we have had that, Jen, haven't we? We investigate them. And so I think once organizations realize we are taking it seriously, because obviously our communal brand is at stake. So, and I think this self-monitoring, as you said, with stakeholders is a great model. I mean, it's not going to be perfect, you know. With 1,300 members, there's always going to be the odd one that tries it on or was naughty, and hopefully the truth will out eventually. But I think by and large, the whole thing is working really well. And I do have a dream. I can't remember if I said this before because I've said it so many times, but, you know, in 10 years' time, you know, the Good Business Charter logos, I hope, will be on half the windows of the high street, and they'll be the half of the businesses that are busy, you know, and therefore it is a critical mass. It is a numbers game, you know. I am pretty impatient as a person, but I've also got to be patient here that we do get the right people involved. So we've got to get the pace, mustn't be too quick, but we're absolutely determined. Hopefully we'll all feel good anyway that we're getting the recognition now and the local press following and all the rest of it. But definitely, as we grow, it can only become stronger and more of a virtuous circle. So it's dead exciting. And please do, you've given up your time today. Hopefully we've pushed you over the line if you're thinking of joining. And we're all doing this, you know, because we believe in it, and we're happy to answer your questions. So that's my ending from me. You know, please do help us, and thanks for your time today, Jenny.
That's an excellent way to end it. Yes, I think I just encourage you, if you're a small business, we know that a lot of small businesses live and breathe this. They live and breathe being a responsible business, and therefore we want to make sure that they feel part of something that's bigger. And for the big organizations, my experience talking to the larger ones is exactly what Kate shared. You know, they have to go through a lot of the checks and balances to make sure, because I'm like, it's straightforward, either you do it or not. Yes, but they've got to make sure that internally everyone's happy before they go public with it, and so therefore that gives us real confirmation that they're not having a laugh. They are doing it seriously, and it does take them time to make sure they work through it all. So just, there was one question there in the chat about business. Have we got evidence of business to business, like GBC businesses favouring other businesses? I would say we have anecdotal, and indeed ourselves, when we went to do our brand work, we looked at our GBC brand organisations and we spoke to a few of them and chose from them. So, and I think that is going to grow. And as we look to make our website as user friendly as possible for that, I think we will see more and more GBC businesses choosing GBC businesses when they need to do a certain work or find a certain supplier.
Jenny, why would you not? I mean, of course we want to support each other. I think we can make that more systemized in due course, and maybe have forums where businesses can meet other businesses. Of course I bought my van from Simon, because like, where was I going to go to? Of course I moved to TSB, because the least I could do. And they've been both companies have been fantastic. It's a bit of free advertising there for you both. But of course we would all choose that, wouldn't we? And that's the whole point of, it's a virtuous circle. It's a win-win. It really is. And I can't stress enough. I know you've heard me say it, and I've written books about it. In fact, do we give a free ethical capitalist away if people sign up? Do we do that, Jen?
Yeah.
There you go. You can't get away from it. So if you can read it in a lot more detail. But I absolutely believe that doing the right thing here and treating stakeholders well is an absolute recipe for success. And it's certainly made all the difference in our business, in our terribly difficult, competitive situation we're in over a long period of time. It absolutely, it's a no-brainer. And I'll go on for hours if you let me, but I better not, because I'm sure you've got better things to do. Anyway, thanks again for joining us today.
So thank you everyone for your time. Thank you, Roger and Kate and Julian, for giving up your time and sharing with us. And it's great to have spoken to you all. Thanks for letting us record it. And yeah, let's go forward, continuing to fire forwards with passion and really believing in this. And it really is great to see that it does work for your big organisations and your small. TSB and Gerber as two great examples, really. So any questions, any ideas you've got for how we keep spreading the word, then do just drop us a line. Thanks ever so much, everyone.